Hi guys, today I want to talk about dissociative identity disorder and overcoming enmeshment issues and gaining healthy boundaries. And I will be touching on the subjects of John Bradshaw and showing you some books also from him and about Susan Forward and the book that she has. All the information in this video will be from the National Institute of Health.gov and choosingtherapy.com. So first off, I'm going to explain to you what enmeshment is. And it states here, enmeshment trauma is a type of childhood emotional trauma that involves a disregard for personal boundaries and loss of autonomy between individuals. The purpose of enmeshment is to create emotional power and control within the family. Children who experience this may feel like their emotional needs weren't met due to lack of individuality or proper roles within enmeshed families. This type of over-intimacy can become traumatic when children are exposed to inappropriate situations that adults should protect them from. Additionally, enmeshment trauma can happen when a child is expected to take on adult emotions or responses. So an example of that would be a parent may routinely overshare with their child about their personal adult problems and use that child as a sounding board to validate their feelings. Or a parent may assume their eldest will be kind of a backup and assign significant child rearing responsibilities. The parent may also think they can use their child as someone to rant to or let out steam on, making them a sounding board for their issues. It may not be until adulthood, if ever, that someone is able to recognize how these relationships impacted their ability to process emotion and function in general. People can have many different responses to emotional trauma, but it is most important for them to recognize these enmeshment relationships as being manipulative and potentially abusive. So over time, if you treat your enmeshment issues, you will learn healthy boundaries. And I'm going to show you a chart that shows what enmeshment is and the difference with healthy boundaries. And here is that screenshot. So now I'm going to go through a list of 7 reasons that you may have enmeshment issues. And number 1 is lack of boundaries. If you don't put up a boundary, your anxiety can raise, your alters can be conflicted, and it can cause a lot of issues. Number 2 is feeling responsible for the feelings of your parent or parents. And a lot of people deal with that. Even still today, even in therapy, I still deal with that. And number 3 is lack of privacy. If you don't put up a boundary for your own privacy, it can make a lot of problems in your life even more complicated. Number 4 is pressure to live up to your parents' ideas for your future. So me as a parent, I even struggle with that because I have children where I have to step back and let my children decide their own future, with guidance, of course. So that's one of my issues I'm actually currently working on. Number 5 is avoiding conflict. People that have enmeshment issues and boundary issues seem to want to jump in and help. And a lot of times you have to step back and let a person deal with their own conflicts and own problems. Number 6 is lack of identity outside your family. So, and that's an issue with especially people that have dissociative identity disorder. They switch a lot to an identity that fits that need or can handle that intense situation. They're literally triggered out to handle a complicated situation, but it can also put you in a more complicated situation. So, and last, number 7, complicated interpersonal relationships. And that's another issue is putting up boundaries in your relationship, marriage, spouse, things like that, which is something I had to learn to do, where me and my husband do sleep in separate bedrooms, even though we've been married for 14 years, because I have a boundary for my internal alternative states. So per se, little alters need privacy. They don't need to wake up with a full-grown man in the same bed. So I literally had to build a separate bedroom. Even though our marriage is pretty healthy, it's just a protective boundary to protect my inner self. So I hope you found that useful. So here's 5 other things I want to bring into the enmeshment circle. And one is romanticized parent. Emotional incest, otherwise known as covert incest, is a type of parental abuse. This can happen in single or dual parent homes and starts when the adult goes to the child to gain the emotional intimacy their adult relationship is lacking. The parent may treat the child like a romantic partner or best friend. There's no physically sexual component in emotional incest, but there may be an inappropriate exposure to sex. For example, a parent may overshare with a child about their personal sex life or even be jealous of their child's romantic relationships. In return, a child may over-idolize their relationship with the parent in order to emotionally protect themselves from the discomfort the relationship causes. Next is helicopter parent. At its most extreme, helicopter parents represent a type of enmeshment. It's natural for parents to want to protect their kids from physical or emotional harm. However, healthy child rearing allows for children to work through their own difficulties. Helicopter parenting executes extremely high levels of control. These types of parents may try to justify certain behaviors by citing safety as a concern. Psychologically, though, there is more about power and control. A helicopter parent may present as anxious and worried, but their behavior helps them feel in control and soothes their anxiety at the response of the child. Helicopter parents force dependency, stunted growth, and lack of coping skills on their kids. And last we have incapacitated parent. Caregiving for the incapacitated or lower functioning can be physically and emotionally exhausting when the family does not have enough help or other options for caregiving. For children who grow up with a parent who required caregiving, their needs may have gone unnurtured and unacknowledged. Children and adult children of high needs parents may struggle with finding their own identity and boundaries. And this piece I'm going to read about trauma bonding. Trauma bonding is a term used to describe the relationship between the abused and the abuser. Trauma bonds are typically what keeps people stuck in a cycle of staying or returning to an abusive relationship. When someone becomes reliant on or immersed in another person, they can think they need that other person in their life in order to survive, making the bond very difficult to break. The abuser or the person in control has likely been calling the conscious and unconscious shots for them. Enmeshment doesn't allow for boundaries, and for targets in a trauma-bonded relationship, they will lose control and may even lose their sense of reality when they fully separate from themselves. So next I'm going to show you a video from John Bradshaw, a short clip. You can watch the full version on YouTube. This is just an idea of what kind of issues you get with trauma bonding and enmeshment and codependency. And he talks about his book that he wrote, which I have read. It's called Healing the Shame. And I'm going to give you a short clip to get an idea of what it's about. So here is John Bradshaw's clip.
Now shame is internalized and moves from being a feeling, which it is, a healthy feeling, there's a healthy sense of shame, talk about that in a minute, to being a toxic state of being, so that we can say that a person is shame-based. or they have a shame-based identity, that when that happens, that core of a person's life becomes so painful to bear that the person must develop defenses, must develop a false self.
So next I'm going to read you about attachment theory of disassociation, and it states that traumatic childhood experiencing in the form of rejection or emotional neglect by the caregiver can lead to disorganized attachment style, making it difficult to develop trustful adult relationships and increasing the likelihood of developing dissociative symptoms later in life. Clough's four-factor theory emphasizes that family chaos, inconsistency in parenting in terms of parental demand and reinforcement style, modeling of disassociation, and inadequate emotional support from parents can act as a risk factor for developing dissociative issues. Taking these factors into consideration, the current study tries to examine the relationship between a client's disassociation and parental inconsistency and how the client was using disassociation to maintain and reduce conflict within the family. Psychotherapy with the client needed to focus on providing support, reducing symptoms, enhancing coping skills, and integrating traumatic memories. So I have touched basis on that, how you have to start viewing your alter's traumatic memories once you get that partial awareness with an alter and you get to know an alter. And that takes a significant, well, at least for me, it took a significant amount of time to learn how to do that and to deal with the somatic symptoms in my body that come with that memory. And I had stated before that you may have to view that memory numerous times before you can have a release of emotional healing. Now next, this talks about the intervention with the client focused on achieving the following goals. And it gives A, B, C, D, stuff like that. So A, to intervene in the faulty attachment pattern, and B, to help the client to develop a cohesive, unified personality and enhancing his coping skills. C, to make the client more assertive in a relationship, and D, to restore the client's functioning. So what he's saying here is basically steps to get you to the point where enmeshment backs down and you learn to put up boundaries and love and accept yourself. The intervention with the family focused on the following. So what it's stating here is if your family's involved, which I have that. I have my family going once, twice a month with therapy with me to work on boundaries and healthy relationships with my husband, my children, my brother, etc. And A, it states to psychoeducate the family about disassociation, and B, to address interpersonal issues with family members and restructuring boundaries around various subsystems / couples, parents, and parent-child. To expect outcome of the intervention was to improve the client's functioning and to make the family more cohesive by discussing the developmental issues with the family. So my therapist had given me 2 books that were very, very useful. And one is called Toxic Parents, Overcoming Their Hurtful Legacy and Reclaiming Your Life, and that was done by Susan Forward. And I'd like you to, if you would like to, read that book, and it tells you how to get over some of these hurdles and boundaries and enmeshment issues. And secondly is the other book I like to that I have read, Healing the Shame That Binds You by John Bradshaw. And I will give you a view of both them books, so if you are interested in learning some of the skills to, one of the skills I found very useful was speaking. I have struggled with speaking since I was a child, and I've even had to have some speech classes to get my speech right, and I still struggle, which is why some people will point out you stutter or you mess up on words and spelling in your videos, and that's why. It's part of my disorder, it's part of my shame that I have to work on. Anyway, so here's the view of them 2 books. So next I'm going to read a small piece of bit out of Dr. Susan Forward's book. It's called Non-Defensiveness. And these techniques are amazing. And I have used them for my own boundaries with my own family, friends, people that I've met. And this is called non-defensiveness. None of us are taught to respond non-defensively. That's why the technique doesn't come easily. It needs to be learned and practiced, which my therapist has done. Also, most people assume that if they don't defend themselves in a conflict, their opponents will see them as weak and ride right over them. In reality, the opposite is true. If you can stay calm and refuse to be stampeded, then you retain the power. I can't stress strongly enough how essential it is to learn and use non-defensive responses, especially with toxic parents or family and friends. This type of response can go a long way toward breaking the cycle of attack, retreat, defense, and escalation. Here are some examples of non-defensive responses that you can try using in your daily interactions. So this just basically gives an example, and one is, oh. The next is, oh, I see. The next one is, that's interesting. Next one is, you're certainly entitled to your own opinion. The next one is, I'm sorry you don't approve. The next one is, let me think about that. The next one is, why don't we talk about this when you're not so upset or angry? And the last one is, I'm sorry you're hurt, upset or disappointed. However, which is one I use a lot. Okay, so continue on. It's important that you rehearse non-defensive responses by yourself before you start using them with others. To do this, imagine your parents or friends or family in a room with you saying something critical or degrading. Respond out loud to them non-defensively. Remember the moment you argue, apologize, explain, or try to get them to change their minds, you have handed over your much-needed power. If you ask someone to forgive or to understand or give them the power to withhold what you're asking for, but if you use non-defensive responses, you are asking for nothing. And when you ask for nothing, you can't be rejected. So that's really useful. And this book is really useful. Again, Toxic Parents, a must read. Now next I'm going to give you a video that you'll find very useful. And this clip is only like a minute long, but I found the dynamics of it to be very intriguing. And it's called Dismissive, Avoidant, Narcissistic Parent. And I just liked it, and I thought I would share it with you. So here is that short clip.
The literature states that this style develops when caregivers are consistently unavailable and the infant learns that distress needs will not be met. They're not going to get what they need. I see this as a clever strategy that I think is rooted in escape, in escaping overwhelm and possibility like an unbearable or intrusive family system, or they were raised in a very shut down, unempathic or transactional family system, no affection, no connection, no emotional heart. The narcissistic parent could have been dismissive avoidant themselves or approached their parental role from barely a half-hearted commitment to their job. I also see them as potentially keeping themselves safe from invasion of crazy, or they were never modeled authentic heart connection and they are just unconsciously like freaked out by connection. They can also appear cold and somewhat narcissistic themselves, but it's like that concept of like fleas in the NPD recovery.
So I hope you found some of that useful. As far as my own issues dealing with some of this, it's been a long journey. The thing is, the idea is to give yourself time and personal space, and that is one thing I struggle with every day with my alternative states and my dissociative identity disorder, because when I need a break, an alter doesn't want to take a break. And there has been numerous times over the years where I've ended up in the ER or situations that I shouldn't have been in because of one of my alters taking over that situation. And I have a lot of memories of that I have to process through. I always find making choices an easier factor with enmeshment issues and boundaries. There are times where I help other people that suffer with my disorder, and I have to put up boundaries for myself to take time for myself. So there are times, like per se on Tuesdays when my therapy days are, I will tell them you can text, but I may not respond. That's a boundary. But it gives that person a way to express themselves and talk about their problems, and I can get back to them eventually when I'm feeling up to par. So there's also the need for making boundaries for holidays and events and funerals, where I always make sure I have somewhere to go that's quiet, or a door or bathroom that I can get to. I also find making a set time for holidays is useful. So per se, I want to go to a holiday event, I will make sure that I set a time to where I say maybe an hour or two, and then I want to go home, hence telling my family my concern and how long I want to stay and not stay. And you know, they try to meet that need that I have. I also put up boundaries that are difficult. One of them is like if somebody passes away and I know my former abusers will be at a funeral or event, and I have to make a hard decision to go to it or not, because there is that issue of other people being angry because I didn't go, or upset because I didn't participate. And here's the thing with that is it's up to that family member on how they feel about that. They can be understanding and say, oh yeah, I understand why you weren't there, and thank you for expressing your sympathy and concern. So that's a good person. A bad person would be, well, I don't care how you feel, you should have been there, or what your mental health care condition is, or whatnot. And that's a bad boundary. So that's somebody that I'm going to step back from and not be so close to or talk about my issues with. So these are boundaries that my therapist has taught me with excruciating, intense therapy over the last 8 years. And she does amazing works, and I'm so thankful for that. And I guess that's all I really have today. You're more than welcome to use this video in therapy and talk to your mental health care professional about working on some of them issues. One hurdle that I'm still overcoming, I can look at this camera, but I can't make eye contact real well, which is another enmeshment issue that I have to work on. So, but all right, well, you all have a great day. Love y'all, and talk to you later.